always good to have those things so you can always, reuse however you want. So for she started it, me and my co-founder in CSID, were both working as journalists in Silicon Valley, and it was in 2013. So way before, Me Too, and before the topic of women entrepreneurship was, as it is discussed now. So different era. And we met the women in the film through our work as journalists, just being plugged into the community. So Stacey, who you're talking about, we had heard of because she had just sold her company at 21. Like that's the first scene you see her in when she's celebrating the acquisition. So we heard of her and she had raised money from Richard Branson. And then credit to my co-founder in CS, she was like, let's see what she's up to now. Because I was like, oh, she's good. She's probably gonna just coast. And she's like, let's talk to her. And sure enough, she had it in her to go on more adventures. And Thuy, I had met at Women 2.0, the conference you see her speak in with her white Vietnamese dress. So that was Valentine's Day 2013. And same, I had this moment of she's a really interesting person and character, and she has a great story. And I told her, can I interview you? And then little did she know it was going to be a 3-year thing. And then Sheena and Agathe, we met at different conferences, and Brienne we heard of also because of her fundraising in the news.
Very interesting. So uh, the dichotomies of entrepreneurship versus a normal life, and I think it was Thuy, if I'm pronouncing her name correctly.
Mm-hmm.
It seemed that she got greater approval once she had failed, and then still showed the stick to itness. It seemed that after she had gotten through that hurdle of, yeah, I failed, but I'm still here, the investors were like, yeah, okay, now we're going to consider you legitimate. It's like, wow, that is just so unique. Do you think it's the same now? Like you mentioned how the Me Too movement, do you think it's changed?
I mean, for the first question regarding Thuy, kind of having this circumvented path to success, I guess. So she actually, I think, really impressed people in Silicon Valley when she went back to Vietnam and showed what her advisors were saying, being, kind of a bigger fish in a smaller pond. She showed what she could do in an environment where she was, respected, where she was listened to, where she had the upper hand. She was not struggling like in Silicon Valley, which was, she was just an immigrant coming in, having, difficulties communicating. And in Vietnam, she had her also in a really amazing network of engineers who were so dedicated to her, would drop everything to do whatever project she wanted to do. And I think that's what she proved that by going back to Vietnam after that first failure. And yeah, it's true that there's the saying in Silicon Valley that if you failed a bunch, like it's kind of like you wear those failures proudly. But I think it was more, which is a little bit of a toxic hustle culture. But in her case, it was more like she proved what she could do in her environment in Vietnam, and that was sought after. But what has changed since the film came out in 2016? I mean, we have a bunch of resources on our website for the number of women venture capitalists, groups and organizations. That's a big change. All Raise, Backstage Capital. There's so many female founders. Like we list them on our website. So for the entrepreneurs out there, go for it. But apart from that is a massive systemic change. But apart from that, the landscape hasn't changed that much. The numbers are still pretty bad, and it's still a very male-dominated field where very little of the money goes to, diverse set of founders, not just women, but anyone who basically is not, like we say in the beginning of the film, a white guy in a hoodie. So the 20-year-old stereotype in Silicon Valley, the tech bro. Yeah.
That's interesting. Now, are you still in Silicon Valley?
I moved to Brooklyn 3.5 years ago, but I still love, going back. I still have a lot of friends there, a lot of, of my memories of making the film for years and just going all around interviewing so many people there. So I still go.
Well, I was curious about whether Valley centric. You know, we're in Boise, Idaho,
Yes.
and Boise has I've only been here 3 years. Just to be clear, I'm not a Boise native. I'm actually a Eastern Canada native.
Nice.
But there's a lot of social entrepreneurship here. And I was thinking as I was watching the movie, that distinction of Silicon Valley wants those unicorns, wants those billion-dollar companies, while there are other areas. And I don't know if I'm typecasting women, i.e., social entrepreneurship will fit better. Um, your thoughts, and I'm not sure there was a question in there.
Wait, you mean where?
Well, Boise, we have more of a gentle view of entrepreneurship.
Oh,
It can be a lifestyle entrepreneur. It can be a balance
okay.
between
Yeah.
versus to me, Silicon Valley is if you're not going to go to $1 billion in 5 years, go away. You know,
I think that's an interesting point of view because I mean, especially now with the pandemic and before that, like Silicon Valley started becoming unsustainable, very expensive to live in. I mean, years before that. And now with the pandemic, I think there's a massive exodus. But I think a lot of people, including Brad Feld, who's a venture capitalist, who is one of the co-producers of the film, have talked about this need to kind of decentralize and to support entrepreneurs in regions all around the US and around the world where there is innovation, like where people actually have problems to solve, because that's one of the other issues that I think we don't really get into in the film. But the Silicon Valley ecosystem now being what it is, which has become a lot of, rich engineers, kind of gentrifying at such a rapid pace that everybody else got pushed out.
Yeah.
It's harder to innovate in the sense of there are not a lot of people who still have a grasp on how the rest of the country lives. And I mean, there's people, but they're not in a position to create those companies. So now there's a lot of actually decentralization, that a lot of entrepreneurship hubs are being created around the country. So this is actually the perfect place at Boys to do that. What local problems do you have that could, like you said, maybe it's more welcoming for entrepreneurs to not go for the, billion-dollar company, which is that whole other idea of scaling for shareholders, which maybe you can do something amazing locally.
It is interesting. We do have a question from one of our attendees. Thank you, Dawn. How do you think things have changed for female business owners in the last 30 years?
I don't know that I could speak to the last 30 years because
I was going to say maybe I could, but I don't think you can. But
the film really focuses on that moment in time, again, pre-Me Too, that was kind of the peak, Silicon Valley era of like, everybody still thinks, it's possible, everybody has dreams of changing the world. There's still very few women who are accepted and who are supported and funded. But it's just that, that little push that we're starting to like get more in there. So it's really that particular moment in time. The film literally came out like I think a few months before Me Too, and that also had repercussions in the tech world. So I think the biggest changes have really been the past couple years in terms of entrepreneurship, just because we've seen the number of women and minorities getting into entrepreneurship and mostly getting funded. Like, again, I think the really important thing is who writes the checks. One thing we've been going away from is the lean in mentality of, oh, we just need people who have the confidence. Well, we know that's not true anymore, right? Because we know that we have a lot of very passionate, confident individuals who are ready, who just need a chance and who need a capital. So I think that has flipped now that we have, again, like we list them on She Started Film. I'll add the link, but a number of venture capitalist firms who are actually, whose job it is to fund underrepresented entrepreneurs. So that's a bigger shift. But honestly, in terms of the big picture, like the last 30 years, I think the pandemic now has really shown us how fragile women's achievements have been. And I literally was reading an article earlier on the Wall Street Journals about how women are being set back like 25 years. So the question about how has it evolved for the last 30 years, where we're learning that now we're actually being set back because of COVID-19, because of women not having access to childcare and to paid leave and being forced out of their jobs at a pace that is literally like a 25-year drop. That's how dramatic it was. But I don't want to get into too much of that right now, but that's to answer the question. We are at a moment in time where if you're a woman in business, this is really gonna be like a defining generation right now. How do we help other women get back to work, and how do we make sure they stay? Because right now we have an entire generation of women who's dropped out.
And it is going to be amazing when I think of that the women in the workforce has been hit so hard. I go, it's probably in part because women are more in service industries. So the service industries have been hammered, and it's like, how can we get them out of the service industries and into more non-service jobs? It's I have a bit of a tech background, so I'm always pushing the technology slant, and that's not always appropriate either. And I understand that. It's part of it is what we've dealt with.
I have a question.
Yeah,
great.
I'm just dropping the list of resources in the chat for the group that we list for women entrepreneurs and women funders.
Awesome, thank you.
Coming back to that, I guess I could start my video so you can see who you're talking to. Hi.
Hi.
Okay, so coming back to like perceptions of women, as you were filming Stacey and her family and their perceptions of her needing to go to college versus her brother, who's going to be totally fine, like, are you still in contact and to see, like, are they actually finally accepting her position that she doesn't need to go to college and she's amazing in her own right?
That's a good question, because that's one of the moments that shocks people the most. It's just the blatant sexism that Stacey's family displays, and that they're not really aware of. To this day, they've seen the film and and it's funny because Stacey told me after, she said, for whatever reason, her parents didn't end up seeing it in the screening or at the festivals. They saw it on TV when it was broadcast on Fuse. And so she said, I wish they had been at the premiere with me or at a theater screening or at any other screening, because when they watched it on TV at home, they didn't get people's reactions. And I think they still don't get it, is what she said. And as far as I know, to this day, they still haven't really forgiven her for dropping out, because she never went back, even though if you look her up, she sold her next company. After that, she went through a whole roller coaster with the Admore that pivoted to something else, but that got sold last year. But I think to this day, it's still like Scott is the good boy, the good guy. And I don't mean that disparagingly, but there's still a discrepancy that hasn't been addressed as far as I know.
Just I think you mentioned it, or whoever was filming was kind of, we want some grandchildren. And it's like, wait, you have 2 children. Can't both of them,
It's shocking. I know. Yeah. People, and it's interesting because this moment is also a moment that, even though it's very clearly sexist, especially the comment about grandchildren, a lot of guys who see the film actually see themselves in Stacey in that moment when they're like being questioned for their life choices. Like, oh, what, you're gonna drop out? So it's just, interestingly, people like really resonate with that moment of just, it's clearly, sexist. Her parents still, I don't think to this day, as far as I know, they have realized or apologized or treated her differently.
Okay. And then just one more. So you are a woman in a dominated male industry film. Mm-hmm. Did you feel any of the struggles that you saw in your documentary while trying to make this film?
Yes and no. I'll say, because the film is so indie independent, it's not like Hollywood that, where you deal with the Weinstein of the world and whatever. We were lucky enough that we were supported by actually some great men who are executive producers and amazing women. So I think when you're very indie, you can pick and choose. You're a little bit, it's really more like a very small startup. That being said, it was extremely hard just to like, if making a film is basically like a startup. So our lives really started resembling the ones on screen, which was not anticipated. We really thought it was going to be a smaller project, and we got caught up into how amazing their lives were and how they let us in little by little. They were like, oh, there is a story there that hasn't been told, of like over time seeing that journey. And so it became like we had to fundraise, we had to create a team, we had, dozens of team crew and all that, and we're like, this is like a whole endeavor, and then we need to distribute, market. So it was terrifying, and we learned on the fly. And in terms of sexism, I think we've been, of course, confronted to it in the sense of like, you see a lot of documentary makers, however independent, a lot of guys, dominating the circuit, being invited to the same festivals, being funded by the same PBS or whatever. But I will say that because independent documentary is still so like small, it's not as bad as like Hollywood.
Okay. And just to keep on that, you're also a reporter. And in my mind, at least historically, that used to be male dominated. What is that industry like now? Or are you still a reporter? Are you?
So right now I've been actually working more on the impact side for other films. So I really became passionate about that, which is a whole other industry and job that I didn't even know existed before moving to the US. And that's kind of been on the rise also just in general. And it's like, how do you use film to make change? How do you distribute a film in a way that it reaches the audiences that you want to reach, and that it accomplish its a mission of change? So I'm working now with another filmmaker, similar to She Started It, but you move that to the world of restaurants and women chefs. I've been doing that for 2 years. It's called A Fine Line Movie. So that's something I really like doing, but I still write, and I still, I still hope to make another film on another topic. And I come at it from a journalist perspective, because that's in CS, same. My co-founder, she came at it from a journalist perspective. And I think that's why documentaries speak to me more than, other medium. And yeah, I mean, sexism is prevalent in any industry. That's our issue, right? That's what again, the pandemic is really showing that again now, that no matter your socioeconomic background, women are being like, hit the hardest, especially women of color. And we don't have the support that we need to grow in our careers, no matter what industry we're in. So I think it really showed that very brutally this past year.
Has your next movie on the restaurants and women chefs, is that already out?
Yeah. I mean, it's similar screenings and stuff. It went on PBS. It's called A Fine Line Movie. So I can tell you more.
Send us your
for
link.
Another event.
I should have said in the beginning, we've had guest speakers. This is the first time we've done a movie, but when we've had guest speakers, I've always said shameless plugging is totally good. So any plugging you would like to do for anything, because we're all here to support each other. And that was one of the, I think, the double or triple benefits of your movie is not only were we showing a movie about the challenges of women entrepreneurs, but we were supporting you in your endeavors as a woman entrepreneur. To me, making a movie is totally a startup. It just tends to have more of a finite end, or at least a semi-conclusion.
And also a less lucrative conclusion. Although, I mean, I forget if it's 90 or 95% of startups that fail. So I forget the stat. We should double check that. But I guess most startups do also end not very lucratively. But I guess the point is that if you're getting into entrepreneurship, there's supposed to be some kind of return on investment. When you get into the arts, you don't really expect necessarily a return on investment. But yes, the process was really similar. So I so appreciate you supporting us and me, because that's what we do. We try to spread the word and get support from. We've got a lot of support from schools and educational, and that's why we made the film. Really, we made it originally for an educational purpose, Not, the goal was not let's just drop it on Netflix and be done with it. It was really about, we had, I think, 450 screenings and counting, with conversations at schools, nonprofits, corporations, and we, the goal of having those conversations, really.
Can you tell us about the original idea that sparked this creation, and what do you hope that we will take away, if anything at all? What do you want us to take away from it?
Yeah, great question. So the film really started with that conference, Women 2.0, where you see Thuy pitching. I had that realization there as a journalist at the time and a storyteller of, oh, that's where the women have been hidden, because I've been reporting in Silicon Valley, and NCIA had the same kind of observation, and we came together and met through that organization. And we're like, oh, every media out there reports about, the Mark Zuckerbergs and the Bill Gates of the world. And there are women entrepreneurs, and there are women in tech, and there are women who are succeeding. And here they are at this Women 2.0 conference. We've never heard of them, never heard their stories, don't even know their names. So it really came from that representation. You can't be what you can't see. And we set out to tell those hidden stories, and we got caught into, again, the lives of these women who led us into their lives, and we're like, oh, there's a deeper story. And the takeaway was really the resilience that is key to any entrepreneurship journey, but also any type of career path you want to take. And we didn't even know what resilience meant until you're in it, and you're like, all right, it's really, how do you recover from those setbacks? And the film doesn't sugarcoat it. So some people are a little bit taken aback. And I'm like, this is not even the tip of the iceberg of what these women go through, and what people, go through in life. So it's really about, how do you recover from those setbacks? How do you keep going? And we didn't really realize, and that we would feel it so viscerally, including in our own lives. So the key takeaway was, how do we instill that to a young audience? And mostly we really wanted young girls to see the film and get that and be like, all right, this is a muscle I can practice, and I can be like them. I can do that. If she can, I can.
Alessandra, did you want to jump in? Yeah.
I just have a quick question. It's kind of backtracking a little, so I apologize. But since some of our attendees have taken the more traditional path of going to college, my question would be, do you think women can still be these fantastic creators and innovators, even if they're going through sort of those traditional motions of getting a higher education?
Yeah, absolutely. What higher education you mean? Other types of
just college in general.
Yeah, no, totally. And that's what I was getting at with the resilience muscle, is just that it's not something we're taught that much. And even it's more taught even in America, where I come from, in France, failure is like really, really stigmatized. And so it's really the idea that we should instill in all of our kids, especially girls, but not only, no matter what career you get into, what degree you get into in college, you needed a lot of grit and perseverance in college to make it through and keep going. It's tough, especially now. So I think those are qualities. And again, you can practice that. And that's something we're not taught to practice that much, especially as women. And I think it's really important that we do that we help each other become more resilient, more, perseverant, and just not giving up in the face of failure. Because no matter what degree you're going to get into, and I think there's actually studies that show that women, when they get bad grades, give up very quickly, especially in math and engineering. That's a huge part of why they don't get into those fields. The pressure of succeeding and being perfect, the way we raise our girls to be perfect, right? And so at those bad grades, they drop out of math and engineering, when the guys keep going. And I think it's a quote literally straight from our movie. I think the guys keep going, and with the C's and the D's, and they become engineers and entrepreneurs in Silicon Valley. Nicole Sanchez says that in the film.
And it was the statement was, the guys just go, oh, that was an awful class, or oh, that was a bad professor. It was like, it's not their fault they got the bad grade.
Yeah.
It's the class or the professor. They actually switch the attribution, while a woman or a girl may take it more personally and go, I did poorly. That's you ever see athletes, and I'm always astounded, I'm sidebar, but I'm always astounded by the resilience of athletes, because they're X number of thousand people are staring at them. And if they do something wrong, everybody yells at them. But you'll see, they'll look at whatever it is, the ball, if it's a ball, or their glove, if it's, or their hockey stick, and they'll go, what, how did you fail me? It's never their fault. And that's,
Totally.
Attribution theory.
Mm-hmm.
Awesome. Do we have more questions? Because I think we're getting near the end.
Yeah, I mean, if there's anything else you want me to wrap up on, but other than that, I'm happy for you all to use this Q&A if you do other screenings, or for whoever ends up seeing the film. Now that you own the film at the school, anybody can watch it anytime, forever and ever. So
well, awesome. Thank you very much. We really look forward to your next movie. We'll go find that. A year like no other. And certainly, please keep us up to date on anything and everything that you're doing, or any way that we can support. We're still working out how this Women in Entrepreneurship program is going to continue at Boise State University.
Yeah, I was going to ask about that.
Well, we're doing something. We're not exactly sure how it's going to look in the future. We're kind of like a startup as well. This is our first year of really doing it, and we're figuring out what we want it to look like in the future. That's so amazing. Who the heck knows? But that's life in an entrepreneurial organization. You just roll with it, and it'll all work out somehow.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much.
Well, thank you. It was wonderful having you. An awesome movie. And yes, we'll be using it for years to come. So thank you.
Thank you so much. And anybody looking for resources, you can go to shestartedfilm.com. We have lots of links.
We'll get that on our website, as well as your other movie, and we'll make sure we get everything up there to help out everyone.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Bye-bye.